through 5th grade teachers to part 6 of our learning series on Unpacking, the Unit Planning Organizer for the Reading Language Arts and Social Studies block. Today's section will focus in on the Social Studies block. Like in the previous videos on this series, we're going to start with looking at the Unit Planning Organizer. Now we're using the same unit planning organizer that was shown in the previous sections of this video, just to show you the final section on the social studies block. So before I go into the parts of the unit planning organizer, which are the same for 3rd through 5th grade, I do want to point out something about the difference between 3rd grade social studies and 4th and 5th grade social studies. In 3rd grade social studies, the units are thematically organized and are linked to the HMH reading units when possible. And in some of the 3rd grade social studies units, students might reread the HMH text from the reading workshop in order to identify the social studies content to support knowledge building between social studies and reading language arts. 4th and 5th grade social studies are a little different because 4th grade is a survey of Texas history and 5th grade is a survey of U.S. history. The units are in chronological order and they are not generally linked to the HMH reading units. So you will not see as much overlap between the social studies and the reading language arts. On occasion, I've tried to include some of the reading skills into the social studies lessons, but thematically they are not linked. So I wanted to point that out before we get into this 4th grade unit, because the 4th grade unit and the 5th grade units are going to look similar, but they're going to look a little different from the 3rd grade. So coming back to the unit planning organizer, at the top, you've already talked about the reading language arts section of this unit planning organizer, and that unit 1 was based off of the HMH module. And then right below that, you see the social studies unit. And in this case, it's Texas Geography and Celebrate Freedom Week. When we get into the top box, we also see the title of the Reading Language Arts unit and the title of the Social Studies unit. In the overview section, you will notice that below the Reading Language Arts overview, which we've already discussed multiple times in the video sections in the video series, you will see the Social Studies unit overview. The Social Studies unit overview is essentially an overview of the main learning objectives of the whole unit. And because this one is about geography, you're going to see that it's talking that students should be learning about different geographic factors, developing their concept of a region, looking at Texas regions, and learning about how the physical environment, the human environment, affects each of those regions. Now, sometimes we have mandatory observances in social studies, and Celebrate Freedom Week is one of them. So during the week of September 16th through the 20th, which includes the date of September 17th, Texas schools honor Celebrate Freedom Week. And you will see here that the state law is identified, as well as a link to some resources. But just know that when it's a mandatory observance like this, the lesson plans will often support that particular observance so that it's built into the social studies lessons and not just something that we're asking you to do above and beyond. As we continue down, below the essential questions and unit learning goals for reading language arts, you will find the essential questions and unit learning goals for social studies. So here we see what geographic factors influence patterns of settlement, how people adapt and modify the environment to meet their needs, what geographic tools are used, and then specific to Celebrate Freedom Week, what is the intent, meaning, and importance of the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and the U.S. Constitution, which is not really thematically linked to geography, but because it is a mandatory and required observance for grades 3 through 12, it is included in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade lesson plans. After the learning objectives and the unit learning goals, you will find the high leverage and complementary TEKS. If you scroll below the reading, writing, and foundational skills TEKS, you will find the social studies TEKS. So these are all of the standards that will be covered in the course of the social studies unit, and the high leverage are the ones that are highlighted here. Again, we have the description of the English Language Proficiency Standards, or ELPS. Then we get into the assessments. You will notice that this says Reading Language Arts Unit Assessments, but there's nothing here that says Social Studies Assessment. We do not have a unit assessment for social studies. Instead, you will find daily formative assessments for social studies. Sometimes they might do something over the course of a whole week. So it would be like a weekly project as opposed to a unit assessment. In the unit pacing guide, social studies is identified over here after grammar, and you will see the topics for each week are here, as well as direct links to the lesson plans. So if I want to go down, I can click here in the unit placing guide, or I can come over here to the table, the contents, or the outline. If I don't see the outline, I can click on the hamburger, and it will open it up, and I can see that after all the reading language arts sections, there's the social studies section, and I can see that that is the case for each week in this unit planning organizer. So I'm going to click over here and show you the components of the social studies lesson plan. So you see here we have in the red header the week number. So this is week 3 of the year. Social studies is the content. It is a 30-minute block. That is how it was designed and what it says in the guidance for the instructional minutes for elementary. And then the topic. Below that, you will see which ELPs will be covered during this week, and a link to see what those actually stand for, and then which TEKS are identified in this week. And to help with vertical alignment, I created this document called the PK through 5 Social Studies Vertical Alignment. The social studies TEKS are divided into strands, which I have identified here at the bottom of the Google Sheet. You'll see the different tabs. So if I'm curious, how are these geography standards, because I know this is a geography unit here in 4th grade, how is that aligned across? So if students are receiving social studies instruction every year, as they're supposed to by law, then we would look here at 4th grade is identifying, locating, and describing the physical regions of Texas. I think I remember seeing something about that in the learning goals and the essential questions, and comparing those physical regions. And I can see that in 5th grade when they'll go into looking at the regions of the United States. And I can see that in 3rd grade, they're starting that comparison. And then technically, they actually go all the way back to pre-K, where they have started identifying the features in the natural environment. So I can see how these TEKS are aligned across. If there is no alignment, like this one, comparing the physical regions of Texas, there's nothing to either side of it. That means it does not have a direct alignment to any other grade level. Whereas here in 5th grade, I can see that they're locating on a map important political features, and I can see that, oh, look at this, in 1st and 2nd grade, they also locate places on maps. So this is how this document works. Going back to the unit planning organizer, below the ELPs and the TEKS, we see the vocabulary for this week. These are some key vocabulary terms that are academic vocabulary. We have a scaffold and extend section. This is going to have different ideas for how to scaffold the lesson to support different learners, relating to reading and to speaking. And then the extension might have a choice board linked, or it might have other suggestions of activities that can be used for an extension. The final section in this top part is the supplemental resources. In this case, the supplemental resources, we have two things from Pebble Go, and then we have a website. Now, these could be used in a center during small group, differentiated small group instruction, if students were interested in learning more or exploring the topic in more depth. Sometimes we'll look at the other weeks and see if there's different kinds of resources. So in week 4, I see a lesson plan. So if I need some additional sources or want to consider a different way of teaching, then I can look at the resources here, the places to visit. Well, I see here that we're looking at regions of Texas. So this tells me that this is just another website for students to explore in more detail. And then when I go to week 5, there is a read aloud for a text that's not available. And then, of course, because this is Celebrate Freedom Week, the resources listed for that. So as you can see, there's a variety within that supplemental resources section. And so oftentimes, if it's a lesson plan and for the teacher, it will say lesson plan. If it's Pebble Go, it's most likely supplemental resources that students could explore during independent time. Then when we get into the lesson portion of the social studies block, you'll see it looks the same as the other reading language arts portions. So it has learning objectives, lesson plans, and then a formative assessment. So when I'm using this in order to plan my instruction for the week, I'm going to look at what the learning objective is. So in this case, it's to identify and use basic map skills. And then students are going to create a compass rose in their notebooks that they can then use throughout the year to help them with being able to identify directions. And then I'm going to look at the lesson plans here in the middle. These are linked to Studies Weekly, is the resource that we use for social studies. And so it will have which week we are currently in and which article is being taught during that lesson. Sometimes we have put multiple lessons together and have included only certain steps to follow in order to have time to do all of that. And then as you can see for the formative assessment, we have different suggestions for, they could be completing a graphic organizer, maybe we're having them use a CLI strategy, in this case stage pictures, to model different maps. So they're taking their understanding of different maps and applying them in a different way. We go down and look at the other weeks. It looks like here in week 4, they're creating a travel brochure, which I can see is linked here with directions. And then in this week, I can see that, well, that's an interesting lesson. They have to actually recite this according to law. So that was included in there for your benefit. And here I see we have some exit tickets that are related to the learning goals. So I'm going to pick one. We're going to take a look at one lesson in particular. We're going to go here to week 4. I'm going to look at day 3, which is identifying the physical features of the regions of Texas. According to this, we did Regions of Texas Article 1 on day 2. And then here we're going to do Article 2 and Article 3. So I'm going to open these links. And it's going to take a moment to load. First thing I'm going to see, because I already have Studies Weekly open in a different tab, is I'm seeing the teacher resource page, which is loading. And I just have to give it a moment to go to the correct week and article. So I can see that the article is the Great Plains. Here we are, week 3, Regions of Texas. And I have a lesson plan that I can follow. And so you'll want to review through that. I see that there's a graphic organizer it recommends for students to use. And then it's going to actually show me that organizer here under printables. So I can also just click here and take a brief look at it. And when I'm looking at that, I see that they are going to be drawing on the map the location of the Great Plains and then describing these different things for the Great Plains and then answering a question that is related to one of the unit learning goals that I saw. There are also oftentimes images that you can use to help students see and better visualize the content. Sometimes it might have primary and secondary sources linked down here in media. Sometimes it has videos that are used in the lesson plan. So there's a variety of things that we can find on this page. And so when you're looking at the lesson plans from Studies Weekly, they are often in this format. So if I come back here, I know that I was going to do Article 2 and Article 3. So my students are going to be learning about the Great Plains as well as, waiting for it to load, it's probably the coastal region. Nope, mountains and basins. All right, so we're looking at mountains and basins. Another graphic organizer. If I come down and look at that, it probably looks the same. I'm probably going to do this for all 4 regions and have them put it into their interactive notebook so that they can reference this information. And then at the end, they can compare how the geography of each of the 4 regions affects Texas. And again, we have some more media showing pictures from the mountains and basin region. All right, so there's the Great Plains organizer again and the mountains and basins organizer, and they're going to complete those in this lesson. So I know that for day 3, we're going to be looking at 2 of the regions on day 3. And on day 4, we're going to look at the other 2 regions. It's going to be very similar to these 2 lesson plans. And then at the end, they'll create a travel brochure using what they've learned about the 4 regions of Texas. So the format of the week sometimes might be that they'll get the content. They might do some independent or partner work going through the Studies Weekly. And then completing a final project about it. And sometimes it's not. So if I come back to week 3, this one, they are simply going through and learning about basic map skills throughout the whole week. So it doesn't necessarily have like a final week assessment. In thinking about Studies Weekly, one of the last things I wanted to show you is in the teacher resource section. If I go to the week itself, what I see is that there is a teacher edition, there is a student edition, and I'm going to click on the student edition because I use this often to help me identify which newspaper are we using this week. So you've received a box. I'm going to do a different video about how to access your resources for Studies Weekly, but this way I can at least check and see. And so we have articles numbered because Studies Weekly numbers them in the teacher lesson plans, but you'll notice they don't actually have a number on the actual physical paper copy. But it's just 4 pages, so there's the front page. When we open it up, here's the spread of the 4 regions. So as you saw on day 2, we were just looking at these 2 regions, and then on day 3, we're looking at the other 2 regions. And so the activity from Studies Weekly was to compare the regions using a Venn diagram. You can always use this as an extension activity or as something for students to do if they're struggling to identify or compare. But in the lesson plan, we chose instead to do the travel brochure as a way of using and applying that information. So that is it for the Studies Weekly. Just a reminder, at the bottom of every lesson week, you will see you have to open Studies Weekly through the portal in order to click on and open these links. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I believe that concludes the series for the main sections of the Reading Language Arts and Social Studies block.